This is 22 News in Focus.
Good afternoon. Welcome to 22 News in Focus. I'm Taylor Knight. Sunday, September 8th is the beginning of National Suicide Prevention Week. Suicide is a growing health concern across the country. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, in 2017, suicide was the 10th leading cause of death overall in the United States, claiming the lives of over 47,000 people. A troubling fact is that suicide is the second leading cause of death among people ages 10 to 34, with over 14,000 deaths. What is causing this rise in suicides and why so many young people? Today on 22 News in Focus, we're going to get answers to those questions. We'll also learn how to identify when someone is in crisis and the resources available to get help. Joining me today are Kelly Cunningham, Director of the Suicide Prevention Program with the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, and Sarah Kendall, Vice President, Clinical Operations for the Mental Health Association. Thank you both so much for being here today. So let's talk about the fact that suicide is the second leading cause of death for people ages 15 to 34. Why is that?
There are so many different reasons why, and it's always so difficult to pinpoint one thing because suicide is very complex. So there's a lot of things going on, whether it be mental health, whether it be a relationship ending, something happening on social media. There are just so many different things that go on. So usually suicide is about a culmination of all those things happening.
Anything you'd like to add?
Well, I think yeah, it's, you know, as Kelly had said, it's the culmination of a number of different things that folks experience. And I think, yeah, it is. I think there's so many different things that folks are, you know, exposed to, or, you know, whether it be, you know, in social media or just, you know, I think it's a lot of knowledge and things that are to folks' attention that they don't know how to process, especially depending on the age, you know, what to do with certain types of information, and then couple that with other stressors that they may be experiencing, whether it be at school or, you know, mental health concerns, other kinds of traumas they've experienced. I think it's complex.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You both mentioned social media. How has that played into things? I mean, this is almost a recent thing, social media.
Sure. You know, you can see the pros and cons with social media. For one thing, for a lot of young people who may tend to be isolated and alone, they find this as a way to be able to talk to other people, right? So they have that connection. But for other folks, you talk about bullying, and if they're bullied, when I was growing up, bullying would be something that happened in school. I'd go home and I had a safe place. And today, social media brings that bullying to the forefront. So they never seem to be able to get away from it.
All right, so what are some risk factors that might cause someone to consider taking their own life?
Well, do you want to start?
Sure. So I think, you know, whether it be, you know, a combination of loss that they've experienced, something or someone significant in their life, times of transition can be challenging, moving from a middle school to a high school experience, you know, there's a lot that happens at that time in that age. You know, having experienced other kinds of traumatic events or losses in their life previously. And I think, you know, mental health concerns, substance use concerns, it's a good number, yeah.
So we talked about the demographic, 15 to 34. What other demographics might be at risk here?
Middle-aged white men.
Why is that?
They have actually the highest suicide rate of any of the age brackets that we have. I mean, we definitely look at youth because of the number of youth that are dying. That's very startling to us, right, and scary. But middle-aged white men have the highest number of suicides.
They might have different factors that go into this?
Yes, and they handle the factors a little differently.
Okay.
You know, you look at, they die at a rate of 3 times more often than women die by suicide. And when we look at things like methods that they might use, or the fact that women might turn to something like therapy more often than men do, they're reaching out for help. Men don't like that feeling of not having someplace to have to talk to other people about it. You know what I mean? They don't ask for directions. So asking for help around something like this can be really difficult for them to do.
Do you have any suggestions on how to maybe get a man in your life to open up more about this if you're concerned?
Well,
Well, I think, you know, as our messages overall is to feel comfortable asking questions of concern, you know, and being direct with those questions. So to say, you know, have you had thoughts of, you know, of ending your life? Have you had thoughts of suicide? So I think part of it is having comfort with being able to have a direct conversation, and then, you know, being a compassionate kind of supporter to try to help get them to the next, you know. And sometimes it's an easier recommendation to start with your primary care doctor than maybe going to a therapist, right? And so I think trying to kind of engage, if there's just a support that you know they feel comfortable with, or suggesting a number of options, one that feels maybe safer, like going to your primary care doctor and having a conversation there. So I think it's unique to each individual, but, you know, trying to provide options and be direct.
Did you have something to add?
I was just going to say, it's also been helpful for men when they hear of other people, maybe somebody that they look up to, who's able to open up and say that they've struggled, that they've had things go on in their life, and it's been difficult for them, that can be a way to get them to be able to open up and talk.
What are some warning signs, symptoms people should look out for?
Traditionally, the most common thing is to say, look out for big changes. So if it's a change from their typical behaviors, such as drinking or even drug use, maybe doing some risky behaviors, such as driving more erratically, just being in relationships and not protecting themselves. So that's a big one. If you see them sleeping more often than they typically do, not having interest in their usual activities.
Anything else?
Yeah, isolating, kind of keeping to themselves more, withdrawing from friends, even coworkers, that might be a thing. Somebody that would have been, you know, commonly at the lunch table, that's not been.
Okay.
And
All right, so if you or anyone you know is considering suicide, you can call the number that is on your screen for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. The Lifeline provides 24/7 free and confidential support for people in distress, prevention, and crisis resources for you or your loved ones. We'll continue our conversation on suicide prevention after a short break. You're watching 22 News in Focus. We're talking about suicide prevention and resources to get help. Our guests today are Kelly Cunningham, Director of the Suicide Prevention Program with the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, and Sarah Kendall, the Vice President of Clinical Operations for the Mental Health Association. So suicide could be an uncomfortable topic to talk about. So how could you ask the question in a more comfortable way if you think someone is thinking about suicide?
number one rule should be to be direct about it. Don't try to say, you know, you're not suicidal, are you? Because when we talk that way to somebody, it gives them the feeling that you want them to say no. You know, that you don't feel comfortable with it. But when we can be more direct and say, you know, sometimes people struggle like this, and when they do struggle like this, they have thoughts of wanting to end their life. And I was just wondering, since you've been going through this for a while, have you thought that way? Have you been suicidal at all? And that just gives them permission to be able to be open about it.
Yeah, I think to be able to be that safe person that is able to hear and receive information, it's important. I think, you know, oftentimes the feelings, it's something that folks keep close to them in isolation because they're not quite sure if it's okay, you know, to talk about or how it will be received. So knowing that that's a confident person that I can confide in that compassionate way.
So the person answers yes. What's next?
Well, first of all, don't. It's going to be really scary, you know, when you ask that question, if they say yes and not sure what to say. I've in the past been able to say, you know, thank you for sharing that with me. That had to be really, really difficult for you to do that. But I am concerned about you, so let's talk about some things that we can do to keep you safe. And are you feeling safe right now? And just open that up and talk about things like, what are the reasons for feeling this way? And also, more importantly, what are their reasons for wanting to live? You know, because we want to make sure that they remember those pieces too.
I guess on the other side of that, they say no. Then what after that conversation? What's next?
Well, I think it's okay to be able to, you know, still ask questions about, you know, what has you feeling this way? Mm-hmm. If not that, then you are still, you know, I've still been concerned, and I've, you know, noticed that you've, you know, not been joining us for lunch, or you're not engaged in the same activities with the same friends. So, you know, what's happening, what's going on, and still being that safe person to be able to have a conversation with.
So just be a safe person, either way.
Yeah.
So you don't need to be a mental health professional to assist someone who may be in need. Let's talk about ask, support, respond. We sort of just went over that a little bit.
Yeah, so that's kind of a three-word approach that we've utilized with a lot of our staff within our agency to feel confident and comfortable having those kinds of conversations that otherwise, without knowing what to do or how to broach, they may not ask. So it's the principles of asking questions directly in a compassionate way, being that supportive listener, and knowing what opportunities or options may be available beyond that one conversation.
So parents talking to children about this, anything different to do there for parents?
Not really. The one thing that's probably really important to let parents understand is that talking about suicide will not put that thought into their child's head. So I think that is incredibly important for anybody to really understand that piece of it, and that when we are open and honest about the conversation, it just, as Sarah has said, it lets them know that you care.
So young kids, teenagers, kind of just the same thing?
Yeah.
Okay. So what is happening throughout the state right now to positively reduce suicide?
Well, for one thing, we're very fortunate to have 5 crisis centers here in Massachusetts that people can call if they are feeling suicidal. And I know you've given that National Suicide Prevention Lifeline number. They are all part of that network. So when you call, you're getting somebody here in Massachusetts to answer that phone, and they're all volunteers, and they're people that just care. They're compassionate, non-judgmental listeners. We offer a lot of trainings around suicide prevention to help folks understand how to help an individual who's suicidal. And we have a wonderful coalition here in Massachusetts, the Massachusetts Coalition for Suicide Prevention. And there are 10 regional coalitions all across the state. There's one here right in Pioneer Valley where people can get involved and hear more about what's going on in their region about suicide prevention and really try to make that effort and trying to make a difference.
For family members, maybe, can they reach out to that same number?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. A family member, a friend, a concerned coworker, anyone can call and get that same, create a compassionate advice, recommendation, options that are available, and also to maybe be able to check in and say, you're concerned for this person. How are you doing?
So we're going to move on to a different demographic here, military veterans.
Sure.
How does suicide impact them?
Well, we've certainly seen it on the news, right? Talking about 22 deaths per day of military or veterans who have died by suicide. It's a big deal. They suffer with a lot of hidden illnesses that a lot of people don't want to talk about when you talk about PTSD and some of the brain traumatic injuries. And it makes it harder for them to open up, that whole persona of wanting to be that tough military person, right? And not being able to open it. I've been very fortunate to work with some of the different military branches, and they are trying to make that difference of letting them know that there is a place for them to go and to talk to about what has happened to them or what is going on with them, and that there are people who really do care.
Anything else you'd like to add to that?
No, I think that really is great. And, I could say I was able to see from our local VA, in Leeds that they're, recognizing Suicide Prevention Week. They're, having events and, bringing the opportunity for everyone within that very large facility to hear, to learn, and to care.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so if you or anyone you know may be considering suicide, you can call the number on your screen for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. The Lifeline provides 24/7 free and confidential support for people in distress, prevention, and crisis resources for you or your loved ones. When we return, we'll learn about the resources available to help prevent suicide. You're watching 22 News in Focus. This week is Suicide Prevention Week, and we've been discussing ways to identify if you or someone you know may be having thoughts of suicide. Now, let's talk about prevention. Primary care doctors are now asking questions about a person's mental health. So why are physicians playing this role in a patient's life?
Well, I can say, I had a personal experience a few weeks back going to my own annual appointment, and my physician provided me with a screening tool for depression. And it was really great to know that a safe place where I go is interested in my whole health. So my physical health, as well as my emotional health, my spiritual health, all of these things that impact each other. And so it was nice to be able to hear what's happening in that practice, which is part of a large practice, so to know that the recognition is being brought to the most, I think, comfortable place to begin for any person.
You just touched on it. It's kind of like the whole health. How does your mental health and your physical health all kind of work together?
It's amazing, but we all know that if one piece is not in line, the rest of it falls apart. And a lot of some of the symptoms that people talk about with depression are physical symptoms, like headaches or stomach aches, being tired all the time. So unless we're asking the right questions, we're not going to be able to get the right answers.
So those kind of exhibit in physical symptoms. Let's talk about depression a little bit more. What other symptoms?
Again, just like with suicide, is they're not involved in activities that they typically would do. They kind of lose focus in some of the things that they're doing. They're just, some people show physical signs such as being a mess, not being themselves, and they look very different. Other people are really able to hold it together, and it's hard for you to know, except internally they may be a mess. Behind closed doors, they're able to open up and show that there's really a lot more going on.
Yeah, I think, again, it's the matter of kind of knowing and being able to have safe, open dialogue. If something doesn't seem okay, to be able to know it's okay to say that, because if a coworker has a broken arm, we want to help them, we'll open the door, we are able to approach that in a very specific way. And so this allows us to try to provide the same sensitive acknowledgement to what they may be experiencing, or just, hey, I'm here if you need to talk.
So you're physically hurt, like you just said, you broke your arm, you go to the doctor. What if you're not feeling mentally well? Where do you go? Where do you turn?
Well, I think we've definitely said primary care is a great place to start that. And if it is a primary care doctor who is doing a screening, that's awesome, because that gives you at least some piece of information. And then that referral to a behavioral health specialist, somebody who really works in this area. So it's a specialist unlike any other, where if you have a stomach problem, you're going to a specialist for that. This is a specialist for the brain.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so Sarah, what is the Best Life Emotional Health and Wellness Center, and what does it offer?
Sure. So that is an example of what Kelly had mentioned. So we are an outpatient behavioral health clinic, and we have folks that are specialized in assisting folks that are experiencing any level of life concerns, whether it be something situational or a more longer term experience of depression or anxiety, mental health, substance use, maybe both, a loss of a loved one, bereavement. And so it's a very kind of open clinic that caters to a unique need. If somebody benefits from walking and having walking therapy, then that's what they'll do if they're uncomfortable sitting in an office. So we really try to approach the individual and what's going to make them feel the most comfortable to share.
Okay, so now if a suicide does occur, what types of resources are available for survivors?
We have some really great resources here in Massachusetts. There are support groups, and they're located all over the state. Actually, on our website, we do have some of those listings of where those support groups are. Some groups will come directly to your home or meet you in a coffee shop if you're not comfortable being in a support group setting. We have providers who will come to communities, such as in the school, when a youth dies by suicide, because we know that that can be extremely traumatic, and we want to be able to help students who might be kind of in the sidelines, that this opens up a little bit more for them, that they may be also at risk. So we try to provide some of those types of things for folks too.
Yeah. I think also there are wonderful groups that exist for individuals that are survivors of suicide attempts. Yeah. And so they have a group where they can feel comfortable with other folks that have maybe had similar experiences to learn and grow together.
Can you talk to me about the effect that a suicide might have on family members, friends, just that?
As a loss survivor myself, I've certainly experienced that grief is very different than the grief of somebody who may die naturally, or maybe had a heart issue, or something else. Part of it is the way we process it. We feel guilty that, did we miss something? We might look at that person and think, how selfish of them for doing this. There are so many other emotions that go through our head, and we don't have the answers to that. The only person who does is the person who is no longer with us. And we can't figure out what we did wrong, and how come we could not have helped them in that time of need when they really needed it. So, one thing I really try to stress with people is, when a person dies by suicide, typically they think that they're doing us a favor. They think that they're the burden. They think that they're worthless. and that we would be better off without them. So the more that we can let folks know that they do mean something to us, and we want them to be here and we care and love them, the more that we can help save a life.
I don't even know what I could add. I mean, that's everything, is to be able to know that it's okay, to let folks know that you care, that it's okay to be cared for, that it's okay to have conversations, because one conversation can make all the difference. Yeah.
And then finally, one most important tip to give someone if they think someone in their family is suicidal.
Do not be afraid to ask them that question. Are you feeling suicidal? And let them know that somebody is there who cares about them. And don't feel as if you have to go about it alone, that there are many people out here that really do care.
Any tips from you? Anything different than that people should know?
No, just that they're not alone. They're not alone. You know, there's a large community in the state, in their community, that are available in a number of different walks and paths.
Thank you so much. If you or anyone you may know is considering suicide, you can call the number on your screen right here for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. This lifeline provides 24/7 free and confidential support for people in distress, prevention and crisis resources for you and your loved ones. We'll have the last word after the break. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Today, we've been talking about suicide prevention. Thank you to our guest, Kelly Cunningham, the Director of Suicide Prevention Program with the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, and Sarah Kendall, the Vice President of Clinical Operations for the Mental Health Association. If you or anyone you know may be considering suicide, you can call the number on your screen for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. That's our program for today. Thanks to you at home for watching. If you missed any of this, you can watch it in full on our website, WWLP.com. From all of us here at 22 News, we hope you have a wonderful day.